So please join me with the Guru Pranam and the Mangala Charan. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shri Swapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajadam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sujivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vigna Vinasha Narasimhaiti Namine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayatim Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Mishwaram Om Tat Sat. So Hare Krishna, welcome again to our Gita Gyan level 2. So we are continuing with our Gita Mahatmya glorification stories of the Bhagavad Gita. So we are now going to talk about the glories of chapter 3 from the Patma Purana. So we have already heard before glories of chapter 1. If you remember, chapter 1, the story was about Susharma and the bull and the parrot, So, and then in chapter 2, the glorification was about Devashama and Mitravan and all that, and Sukama. So now, chapter 3. So Lord Vishnu tells to Lakshmi Devi, my dear Lakshmi, now please listen to the glories of the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So this story, it begins in the town of Janasthan. So, my dear Lakshmi, in the town of Janasthan, there was a Brahmana of the name Jada. So, the name of this Brahmana was Jada. And he was born in a very good dynasty of families, the Kaushik dynasty, and lineage of very great Brahmanas who have come down, old family. But this Brahmana, though he came from such a distinguished family of Brahmanas. Nevertheless, he was not a very proper person. So what he did, he along the years, due to bad association and due to also the great desire for greed and all that, he gave up his Brahminical duties. So, in Parampara, they were following Brahminical duties, but he gave it up. And after giving up, he decided to take up he became a Vaishya. Vaishya means one who is a merchant. He became a businessman. And as he was doing businesses, he was very successful in his businesses. So, and due to his success, he was able to earn a lot of money. But he became very miserly. He started loving his money a lot, his wealth, and he wouldn't give it away in charity. He wouldn't give any kind of charity. Though he came from a Brahminical family, he forgot his duty of charity. And he made a lot of friends. Usually wealth attracts a lot of the wrong type of people who flock around that person. And along the way, he became corrupted, and he also gave in, and he started indulging in a lot of sinful activities. He was very fond of gambling. He was very fond of drinking, hunting animals, visiting even prostitutes. In this way, he wasted all his wealth. So he performed lots of sinful activities with the wealth that he earned, completely forgetting his Brahminical family lineage. So one day he was traveling northwards, and then he wanted to go somewhere for his business trip. And in this business trip, he performed his business very well, and he earned a lot of profit. And of course, he did a lot of swindling, and also, he was rather cruel in collecting rent and all that. But after collecting all this money, so he was on his way back, and it so happened that he traveled along a lonely road, and in this lonely road, it was already getting dark. So night was falling, and so as night was falling, darkness started to engulf the forest road. He was traveling alone, not very intelligent at the time. So he decided to take rest under a particular tree. So soon it became quite dark and a bit misty also. And without him knowing, actually, there were a gang of robbers who were following him. So you can see here. And they realized, oh, this must be a rich person. I think we will wait until he takes his rest, and then we will go and do our job. So they were following him. And then finally, when he came to this tree, he decided to take a rest. It was a lonely tree. He thought it was a good spot. So as he took rest, suddenly robbers came, jumped out of the dark, and slashed him and cut him, and they killed him. And after killing him, because they didn't want any kind of, because they realized he was a very rich person, and they didn't want any kind of repercussions, so they killed him, and they stole his wealth, and they left his body there. So, but because Jada, he had given up all religious activities, and he had performed lots of sinful activities, led a sinful life, and also because he met his death in a very violent way, and also because there was no one there to perform the rites for him. So he ended up becoming a ghost. He took up a ghostly body, and this ghostly body had to stay within that tree area. He haunted that area, and in this way, he was terrorizing other people who used to come to this area also. It became known as the haunted tree within that forest. So a ghostly body is not a very nice body. It's actually a punishment of sorts. So usually people who die violently with unfulfilled passions, very strong passions, and no one to perform rites for them, or people who commit suicide, this kind of people, they usually end up as ghosts. And it depends also on their consciousness. And ghostly bodies have punishment actually. So they actually go through lots of suffering because the ghost, there are different types of ghost species, different kinds, Pisasha, Rakshasa, Vedala. So like that, there are different types. But basically ghost means that they have all the desires in life, they have all the hankerings in life, and on top of that, but still, and they have all the thirst and the hunger, but they cannot eat anything and they cannot drink anything. So they are always hungry, they are always thirsty, but they cannot satisfy their desires. So in this way, imagine it gets worse and worse. The feeling gets worse and worse. So like that, he has lived his life in that way. Then this Jada, he had a son, and in his place, so that he had many sons, but there's one son who was very unlike his father. And this son was rather religious. He was quite religious, and he wasn't at all like his father, because usually the father will go for many trips. So and he was basically staying with his mother, and he learned Brahminical duties because the father will still allow him to go to school. So he became very learned in the Shastras. He took up a lot of interest in understanding scripture. And he was trained by his maternal family, his mother's side. So, but the family was worried and concerned because the father didn't return back to Janastan after a long time. So they decided to ask him to go and search for him. So this son, he went to search. So he traveled, he tried to retrace all the steps that his father took. And after some inquiry, eventually after some search and long travel, he reached finally the town where his father had last come to do business transaction. So it's a beautiful city area near the desert part. And over there, he went and inquired a bit here and there. He asked everybody what happened to his father. And eventually he came across one contact, another merchant, who happened to know his father. And on top, not only he happened to know his father, he also knew that his father had died. How he knew? Because after the father, that place became haunted and all that. And the robbers, they took his wealth and they sold some of his items in this city. And this merchant was one of those who bought some of the items. And then he realized that these robbers must have killed him and then sold his items to him. So, but he had what to do. So anyway, so he told this son, I think your father had died. These burglars had killed him. And that's one area in the forest also, which is rather not a nice place to go. So what he says, what I think you should do, since he died such a death, you should go immediately to Varanasi or Benares, Kasi. So Varanasi, and then over there, Varanasi is a very famous city in India. And then over there to perform Pinda. Pinda means the last worship, the last rites, to offer the last rites and also offer food to his departed father through a ritual. And in this way, release your father from the hellish condition that he may be suffering in whichever way. So then this son, being an obedient son and being a pious and religious son, immediately he left for Kasi. So he traveled to Kasi. He wanted to go to Kasi. But as he was traveling, he had to pass through a stretch of forest. So he was walking through this stretch of forest. And on the 9th day of his journey, all right, he came to the area where the father also previously had come. And just like how his father also had previously come, this area, the forest, night fell. So it slowly became dark. So as slowly it became dark, this Brahmana son, he wanted to take a rest also. And if you can imagine, fate had it that he took his rest under that same tree which his father was killed. He didn't know, of course, but he went and took his rest there. But unlike his father, the Brahmana, he just doesn't take rest. So before he wanted to take his rest, he's a Brahmin and all. So he will perform his evening performance, evening rituals, right? So he performed this evening puja under the tree. And then he also, along with that, he recited, because one of the things he always does due to his learning is that he will always recite the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Every day, that was his practice. That was his sadhana. So he was reciting the third chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And as he was reciting, at the end, towards the end of that chapter, suddenly he saw a face. So this face was the face of his father. His father appeared like a ethereal mist near that tree. And as he was reciting the Bhagavad Gita, the father was listening. And then eventually he revealed himself as the ghost, as the specter. But what happened, as he was reciting these verses of the Bhagavad Gita, his horrible form changed. He was able to see the face of his father, and eventually his entire form exploded in a burst of light, and he saw in front of his eyes a very beautiful form took place within that area where his father's ghostly form once stood. So here he saw the beautiful form of what looked like Lord Vishnu himself. But this is not Lord Vishnu. This father, he actually took the form of almost like Lord Vishnu. So forearm form, very beautiful forearm form, very effulgent and shining. And in this way, it lighted up the entire area with the effulgence of this father. And then his body was the color of dark rain, wearing a yellow dhoti. And in this way, he introduced himself. He told the son, actually, I am your father, Jada. And then he told the entire story of what happened to him, how he was, due to his greed and his sins, he was killed, and then he became a ghost. And then thanks to this son who came and recited the Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, immediately he regained he lost his ghostly form, his sin disappeared. And not only all his sins disappeared, he also got this wonderful forearm. This is called Sarupya Mukti. Sarupya Mukti is one of the 5 types of Mukti. And in this Mukti, the Lord gets the same form as the person, the devotee gets the same form as the Lord. The Lord blesses him with the same form. So that's how he looks just like Vishnu. So like that, Vishnu Dutas, they call them the Vishnu Dutas. Those who serve Lord Vishnu in Vaikuntha, they all have the same form, just like the Lord. The Lord blesses them with such a opulence. This is one of the Aishwaryas. And then he said, my dear son, you recited the 3rd chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, and thus freed me from the ghostly form which I had received. And due to my sinful activities, I had received that form. Now, you should return home, because you don't have to go to Kasi anymore. Because the purpose you wanted to go to Kasi was to perform these rituals, this pinda and all that, which could only, help me a little. But by reading this Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, you have not only delivered me, you have delivered my sins completely. And you have not only that, you have given me liberation and allowed me to go back to Vaikuntha. So thank you so much. And in this way, he was about to leave. Then the son asked him, he was surprised, of course, and he was very sad. His father died and everything, but still he was very happy that his father attained the highest perfection of the purpose of life. And then he inquired, was there any further instructions that he could do for him? And then the father, in the form of the Vishnu Duta, he told him, right, my brother has also led a very sinful life. I have a brother and he had led a very sinful life. You have delivered me, but I request that you kindly deliver my brother also. He is suffering in some of the darkest regions of hell due to his sinful life. So please do whatever that you did, which saved me. Recite the Bhagavad Gita chapter 3 day for him and dedicate your benefit for him. In this way, you can free him and you can also free all of our ancestors if you were to constantly recite the Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, and all of them, in whichever form they are, in different lives, they will all attain the highest goal of life. So this was his request. So then what he did, then after that, they are all suffering from this birth and death, and he asked him to chant the Bhagavad Gita chapter 3 for their benefit also. And after that, the father, he entered into a beautiful aeroplane. This aeroplane is called Pushpaka Vimana. Pushpaka means flower-like aeroplane coming from the spiritual world, coming from Vaikuntha. And this Vaikuntha plane came to take his father back to Vaikuntha. And in this way, amazed and his faith so much strengthened by what he saw, this Brahmana boy, he returned back from that place, went back home, and constantly with great faith, every day he would recite the Bhagavad Gita chapter 3 without fail, constantly. And in this way, he was able to free so many people, all his entire ancestors, hundreds and hundreds of them, he was able to free in different lifetime situations. And in this way, he also, at the end of his life, he would dedicate these prayers while he's chanting Bhagavad Gita. He will chant in front of his Lord, Sri Gopinath. So he had a deity of Gopinath, and in this way he would chant. So this was all and what happened? So what happened was in Yamaraj, in Yamaloka, this was in Yamaloka, because of this activity of his son, in Yamaloka, this is Yama, he got a message one day. So there was a Vishnu Duta, another four-armed personality like Lord Vishnu. In fact, the father himself, who came to Yamaraj and told Yamaraj, Lord Vishnu, he is lying on the ocean of milk on Ananta Sesh. He has requested that you need to release quite a lot of people from one particular hell. And then Yamaraj also, he was surprised. Oh, this is usually not what happens. Okay, but since it's coming from an order from Lord Vishnu himself, therefore certainly I will release it. So he released all of them, and many souls were released from this hellish, all these ancestors of this boy who recited this Bhagavad Gita chapter 3. And then after that, Yamaraj, he was curious. He wanted to know how this happened. So he got onto his buffalo carrier and he left Yamaloka and he went to see Lord Narayana. So Lord Narayana, he was lying on the bed of Ananta Sesha. His body was so brilliant that he defeated thousands of suns. And yet it was all cooling rays. So more brilliant than thousands in suns, yet cooling rays. And as Yamaraj approached Lord Narayan, he saw how not only he was there, so many thousands and millions of devatas also have all come to witness and take darshan of Lord Narayan. So together they were all there. They could see Lord Lakshmi Devi at the feet and so many different devatas all around him. So Yamaraj immediately fell down and offered his respects to Lord Vishnu and offered the praise. So he gave beautiful prayers. So here are some of the prayers I am reproducing here. My dear Vishnu, you are the well-wisher of all the conditioned souls. There is no limit of your glories. From you, the Vedas have come. You are time, and in the course of time, you will destroy all things. And then Yamaraj continues, you are the cause and maintainer of the three worlds, and you are the super soul, the Paramatma in everyone's heart, who is directing their activities. You are the guru of the whole universe and the goal of all devotees. And then he finally says, O lotus-eyed one, Patma Bhushan, Padmanayana, please accept my obeisances again and again. Your glories are unlimited. So in this way, he went on offering beautiful prayers. And then after that, he finally asked Lord Vishnu, Oh Lord Vishnu, you gave me this instruction for me to release so many prisoners from this hellish planet. Can you tell me what is the reason? And then Lord Vishnu told, no worry, oh Yamaraj. He replied in a very sweet voice, and it's described that the voice was very sweet, but yet it was deep like thunder. And then Lord Vishnu explained, because he had a son, the ancestors had a son on earth who was reciting the Bhagavad Gita chapter 3 with great devotion and offering that to as a offering to me. So in this way, simply by doing this activity, he was able to release so many of his ancestors from hellish regions. So that's why you had to release them. So now, please, Yamaraj, return back to your abode and continue to do your duty. So that was the instruction. And meanwhile, back on earth, this boy, the son, he continued to recite the Bhagavad Gita chapter 3. And in this way, at the end of his life, he also boarded a wonderful Pushpaka Vimana aeroplane. And in this way, he also returned back to the Vaikuntha, the supreme abode. So that is the story of this Jada and this son, and how he was able to deliver his entire ancestors. So there are a few lessons we can understand from this. So first of all, we can understand how Jada, right, he gave up his duty as a Brahmana and he took up some other duty which was not due to him. So therefore, there is nice verse, in Bhagavad Gita. My dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice, thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads a life full of sin. Living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain. So that's what Jada did. He gave up his duty and indulged in sinful activity simply to satisfy his senses. And in this way, he had lived in vain. And this is what happened to him in the end. He became a ghost. And then the Lord also says in Gita 3:35, it is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than another's duties perfectly. Destruction in the cause of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duty, for to follow another's path is dangerous. So just like Jada, he was supposed to be a Brahmana, his nature was supposed to be a Brahmana, but he gave it up and he became a Vaishya. And because he performed his Vaishya duty, he didn't perform his Vaishya duty also properly. So very quickly he fell down. So to giving up one's duty is not correct. So in the same way, Arjuna also, due to sentiment, he wanted to give up his duty of Kshatriya. He did not want to fight in the battle. And in this way, Krishna didn't like that. Krishna didn't allow that to happen. So it's very important that one sticks to one's duty, no matter how difficult it is, how one shouldn't have consideration. Just like, a wife in the home, whether the day is hot or whether the day is cold, in those days in India, they used to cook in the kitchen. Their kitchen was earthen kitchen. So they will sit there and in the hot fire, in the hot stove, wood stove they will have. So whether it's hot or whether it's cold, it doesn't stop them from cooking every day to do their duty. So in the same way, happiness and distress or any kind of sentimental reasons should not disturb one from performing one's duty, because people rely on them. People depend on others to do their duties. If nobody does their duty properly, then there will be chaos in the world. So that is a moral reason, a very mundane reason. And the Lord didn't want chaos to be created. So therefore, he established this rule. So this is another point. So to actually go against that is not, it's basically adharma. So it creates sin. So therefore, one suffers the reactions. So then we can also see from this story how Jada, though he became a ghost, so how, and due to all his sinful activities, there was no real, there are ways to do pinda and rituals, but simply without even doing rituals, simply by chanting Bhagavad Gita, devotional service. Bhagavad Gita is devotional service. Devotional service is so powerful that for a devotee, one doesn't have to do all these rituals. Simply by performing devotional service, it is more than sufficient to achieve the goal of all those rituals. So we saw here in this story how he didn't even have to go to Kasi. So that is the power of devotional service and the power of Bhagavad Gita. So we can understand so far that Gita, simply by reading Gita, we save not only ourselves, we not only benefit ourselves, we benefit ourselves, we remove sin from us, we are able to purify ourselves, we are able to develop devotion for the Supreme Lord, and at the end of life, we are able to attain Vaikuntha abode. But at the same time, a person who takes up devotional service, a person who takes up Bhagavad Gita recitation, or the person who takes up chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, so all these people who do perform devotional service, they are automatically benefiting their family members also. Not only those who are living, the direct family members, also those family members who have passed away. So that's one of the greatest things we can do. So like that, these are something which we can act in our daily life. So this is basically the story of this Gita Mahatmya glorifying chapter 3. And so we can do this also, when people pass away during funerals or during tithis, right? It's a very nice thing to do, to read Bhagavad Gita, to recite, to chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So all this is for the benefit of purifying the atmosphere, purifying the departed, and also purifying ourselves. Okay, so now we will speak a little bit about the summary of chapter 3. What chapter 3 is all about? So chapter 3 is known as Karma Yoga. So Karma Yoga, Karma Yoga means, the karma means action or activity. So we know the story of Bhagavad, of how this conversation between Krishna and Arjuna took place, right? You remember this picture. So Arjuna didn't want to fight. He gave so many reasons. All this was discussed already previously. So after giving all these reasons, then Krishna tried to counter those reasons. He's tried to give him proper understanding. But in order for that to happen, Arjuna had to first surrender. So therefore, in chapter 2, he surrenders. So when we get confused, we have to take the example of Arjuna. Just like when Arjuna became confused, he surrendered and accepted a guru. And he told the guru, now I am your disciple. Please tell me what to do. I'm now suffering such a terrible suffering. Can you please help me? Tell me what to do. And he had his reasons. I don't want to fight. You're telling me to fight. I don't want to fight. But at the same time, my heart tells me you're also right. So, but I'm confused. I don't know what to do. I cannot decide. My conviction is shattered. So please tell me. So he surrenders, accepts Krishna as Guru. And in this way, that is the way to begin spiritual knowledge. Not to approach in a very arrogant or in a very manner like, to take, basically spiritual knowledge is to be taken in a humble approach. Then that knowledge will enter deep into our heart and take root. So basically here we want to summarize chapter 3. So in chapter 3, we can talk about Arjuna's scenarios on duties, because this is about Karma Yoga, right? So Karma Yoga about action and activities and our duties. So let's take Arjuna as an example. So here's Arjuna's scenario. This is the scenario. The scenario is Arjuna says, I don't want to fight. I want to leave everything and go. I am frustrated, I am hurt, I am confused, I am bitter, and I am disappointed. So because of all this, I want to give up my duty and I just want to just go. So the understanding is, we can understand from this Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, that to let go one's duty based on some sentiment or based on anything else is actually adharma. So one has to perform duty, right? So to give up that duty on such pretext of sentiment and confusion, so this is like the mode of ignorance. They don't really understand what is happening, and due to some conflict or some kind of feeling, they just want to let go. So escapism is always in the mode of ignorance, right? We understand, isn't it? We should always face our challenges. We should always approach it, running away from problems. When problems come in life, we don't run away from problems. We confront the problems, but with knowledge, with the right attitude, with the right mood. So escapism, like ostrich mentality, when the lion comes, the ostrich will not run sometimes. What the ostrich will do, it becomes so scared, it will dig a hole in the ground and it will put his head inside the ground. And he thinks that now it's safe. I don't see the lion anymore. So that is not going to be helpful. That's only going to create more problems for us. So in the same way, this kind of attitude of Arjuna, if he has to say, I don't want to fight, I want to run away, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that, and I give up my duty, because people are depending on Arjuna. Arjuna's duty is a Kshatriya. Kshatriya is to uphold Dharma. And if he gives these reasons to say, I don't want to do my duty, then all those who are depending on him, so he has let them down. So therefore, he has to take the sinful reactions for all of that. And also for the sinful reactions of not upholding Dharma as he was promised, as he had promised to do. So that's the first context of understanding, right? It is sinful to give up Dharma based on ignorance. So then what should we do? So next, another scenario is given. So the second scenario here, what if Arjuna says, I don't want to fight, same, I want to leave everything and go due to frustration and loss, same like the earlier scenario. So then he says, I will now give up material pursuits altogether. Okay, I understand my duty, I cannot do my duty, Allah, I'm just fed up with everything. I want to just go to the forest and perform spiritual activity. So this is escapism actually. So it is not, that is not the real purpose of spiritual knowledge or spiritual activity. It is not, one doesn't take up spiritual activity in that kind of mood, because one is taking up spirituality simply to run away from life rather than to conquer life, right? So that kind of attitude is always mode of ignorance. It will not last long, because the moment their attitude changes, they will leave the spirituality and they will come back. The moment their problem is solved, they will again, and their mind will not be settled, because in order to take up spirituality, the mind needs to be peaceful. It cannot be, having anger, negative feelings and all that and continuing spirituality. So therefore, this is called spiritualism in the mode of ignorance. Except for very rare cases, detachment from matter is premature. Like some people, they get married and then they feel their marriage is very difficult. And then they say, okay, I want to leave my marriage and I want to become a sannyasi. So that is the wrong motivation to become sannyasi. That is called taking a renunciation in the mode of ignorance. And such a renunciation will not last. It will only create problems. So such detachment from matter is premature. It is not matured. It will only, and it's only due to frustration. It's only out of frustration that they are trying to renounce, not out of wisdom. So having failed materially, simply because they have failed in their material situation, they are now thinking I can maybe achieve success in the spiritual situation. So their aim is some kind of gain, not the results that they will get out of spirituality. So it is seen as an alternative to attain fruitive desires. So they think I will get whatever I didn't get in my material life, I will get it in the spiritual. So like that, we have many people who sometimes, they have failed in the material life. They are not successful. They didn't do well. They suffered. They had frustration. But what they do, they give up and then they say, okay, they'll enter with the same mentality into spiritual circles, and they'll bring that same material mentality only into the temple. So therefore, we will find in situations in temple also, we will have politics, we will have people who are desiring for gain, name, fame, glory, because they don't understand the actual purpose of spirituality. So that's why we have to avoid this. So unless they are very fortunate and they take genuine shelter, unless genuinely in their heart they have had a change, risk of spiritual fall down under such immature understanding is very high. And it opens the path to false renunciates. So this kind of things creates disturbance in society, and it causes people to lose faith in such spiritual people because they give a bad name to spirituality in the long run, right? So such an example leads population astray. People start to lose faith in spirituality, and it creates a bad example in the long run. So therefore, Krishna doesn't encourage Arjuna to take up such a thing. Because Arjuna wanted to do that. He said, I want to give up this. Yeah, never mind, let them have the kingdom and everything. Never mind, I'm frustrated. I'll just go to the forest. I'll become a mendicant. I'll beg and I will become like a sadhu. So it's not going to work. One has to take up spirituality for the right reasons, not for the wrong reasons. So this is called renunciation in the mode of ignorance. So one cannot give up one's duty. If one gives up one's duty in these kind of reasons, then he still has to pay for the sin of not doing his duty properly. Then there is another scenario. So in this scenario, Arjuna, he will say, okay, you have told me already, it is sinful to give up my duty. Okay, I will fight. So, but I don't really want to, and so I will do it half-heartedly. So what is this scenario? This scenario is, okay, I will do my duty, but I don't really want to. I don't. Therefore, what I will do half job. I will not do a proper job. Imagine if you are supposed to be a teacher and the teacher doesn't like to teach and he's there only to get material gain, and then he performs a poor duty. So isn't that sin, right? So people are relying on that teacher, but the teacher doesn't do his duty. So the sin of not doing that duty, he has to carry. So this is mixed piety and sin. Why is mixed piety and sin? Because mixed piety, because he is still trying to do his duty. He is not let go. So that is piety, punya. But yet there is also sin because he is not doing a proper job. He is half-heartedly doing it and people are depending on him. So therefore, there is sin also involved. So duty is not forsaken altogether, but sin is still accrued due to willful negligence of duty. So therefore, reactions are mixed. So this is how we can understand. And then another scenario I will give you. So this kind of scenario is in the mode of passion. So it's not mode of ignorance because they have not completely abandoned duty, but they have not got the proper understanding of duty. So mode of passion. They allow their sentiment and their passions to influence their execution of their duty. So then here there's another scenario. Here Arjuna will say, okay, I will fight. And not only I will fight, I will do it very well, and I will do it to win a kingdom. So this kind of mentality is in the mode of passion. The other extreme of the mode of passion. I will do my duty very well. Yes, right. So that's punya. I will get piety, punya, because he did his duty. No sin is there, right? But at the same time, he is doing it for what purpose? His purpose is to get fruitive activity. He wants the fruits. So that is called karma kanda. So that means he wants to enjoy the output. He wants to enjoy the results of his activity. So that is not recommended also. It's better than the other scenarios which I've given. That's karma kanda path. So long as duty is based on dharma, irrespective of motivation, no sin is accrued, right? Risk of sin is there still if motivation overpowers dharma. Punya is gained, right? But what happens? He does not gain liberation. He gets punya. That means due to his performing his duty, he will get his rewards either in this life or in the next life. Just like, Duryodhana and all that, though Duryodhana was very bad and everything, he had to he performed lots of sinful activities, but because he did his duty properly, he fought in the battle. He didn't run away from the battle. So because he stuck to the battle and he died in Kurukshetra, holy place, so therefore he went to heaven. So, but that's not the end of the story, because after he enjoyed in heaven, he had to still go down to hell. He enjoyed heaven to enjoy his pious activities. After that, he had to go down to hell to go through his sinful activities. After that, he had to again take birth again. So this is not good. It's not liberation. It's simply karma kanda, fruitive activities. So Krishna will tell Arjuna, don't do this alone. Do something even higher. So there is something even higher to this. What is that? So that is the third scenario. This is in the mode of goodness. So this scenario is, Arjuna will say, I will fight because it's my duty as a Kshatriya. I am not interested in the outcome, really. That means I'm not interested whether I win, whether I lose, whether I get a kingdom, whether I don't get a kingdom. But because it is my dharma and it is my duty, I will do it. But I will do my duty to the best of my ability so that I can execute my dharma in the best way. So that is mode of goodness. And this is the beginning of yoga. Because this kind of motivation, this kind of mentality will bring us out of this cycle of birth and death. Because it's yoga, it leads us to transcendence. So this is karma yoga, beginning stage towards the path of liberation. But karma yoga alone is not enough. It has to go on to jnana yoga. The goal of all this eventually is to learn to detach and then to cultivate knowledge. So it has to go to jnana yoga. And after that, it has to eventually go to bhakti yoga. Then only one gets the ultimate goal. But it's the beginning of the transcendence. Okay? So they do their duty. They do it for duty's sake. Duty's sake, right? And then there's another scenario. Now, this scenario is the best scenario. So this scenario says, Arjuna will say, I will do my best and I will fight, do my duty, only because it is Krishna's desire and it will please him. So if one performs one's duty in that mentality, then that is the highest yoga. That's bhakti yoga. And it will immediately give one liberation, and not only liberation, it will immediately give one devotion, pure love of God. So that is the perfection of yoga. So practical for all classes and all ashrams to follow. So this is easy to do. So, we all have our duties. A child has a duty. The duty of the child is to obey the parents, right? So, and then the wife has a duty. Like that, the husband has a duty to protect the family, to give protection and to support, right? And also not only to give protection and to support, is to guide the family towards dharma. So that is also the duty of the father. So like that, there are duties. That's the duty of the family. but that's also occupational duties. Duties, if we have working for someone, we are entrusted with something to do, then we have to do it properly. If you are a teacher, then we have to teach properly. If you are, like that, this is all duties. So if we do all these duties, whether we are a husband or a wife or a family or a occupation, we cannot give up our duties. When the going gets tough, we say, okay, I want to give it up. I want to now don't want to do my duty. I just want to do something else. When people are depending on us, so that is sin. So one has to perform it, and one need not do it simply because I want to get the fruit. So here it is recommended that one should perform one's duty in yoga. And ultimately, we don't want the fruits, but we want to do it for Krishna's pleasure, for God's pleasure. So if we do that, and in this way we motivate ourselves, Krishna will be pleased if I do my job properly. Never mind if other people are not pleased. Never mind if other people don't see. But Krishna sees, he's in my heart. He knows that I'm doing my job properly. So if one has that mentality and that one does it only for Krishna's pleasure, and he does it perfectly, that is bhakti yoga. So it's very practical. Everybody can do it, right? So we are earning money. We can earn money and then we can use it for the service of God. We can give some donation to the temple, or we can, do some worship for the Lord. We can perform, we can offer bhoga, food to the Lord and eat that as prasadam. We can buy flowers for the Lord, garlands. So these are all ways where we can use money in the service of the Lord. We can use our hard-earned wealth. So like that. And also there is time. We can use our time. Even greater than wealth is time. If we can offer our time for the Lord, do some service in the temple, or do some preaching, or do some Harinam, or spend time to chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra, or to read Bhagavad Gita. So offer our time, offer our mind, offer our intelligence, and offer our life, offer our consciousness. So all these things is very wonderful activities which we can perform for the pleasure of the Lord. So these are the lessons that we have understood from this chapter 3 in summary. So chapter 3 is basically, there are two ways to attain transcendence. So Arjuna will ask, why should I fight if it's better I take up spirituality? Because Krishna has told Arjuna, you do your duty for a higher purpose. The higher purpose is to become spiritual. So if you're talking about spiritual, then why I must fight? Fighting is so horrible. So he had this idea that spiritual people don't fight. So, don't do their duty. So he doesn't understand that there is dharma. So then Krishna tells there are two ways to spirituality. And between the two ways, one way is very difficult. The other way is far better, far superior. So one is the path of jnana and the other is the path of bhakti. Both are yoga. So jnana path is difficult because, you have to first do karma yoga, then do jnana yoga, cultivate knowledge, and then perform meditation, dhyana yoga. So it becomes very, very difficult. Whereas he says, if you take to the bhakti yoga process, easily you can approach the ultimate goal. So this he mentions in chapter 3. But since chapter 3 is entitled Karma Yoga, he begins by talking about Karma Yoga, the cycle of sacrifice, the art of work, setting an example, how one should set an example. One shouldn't give up one's duty and go off in the name of spirituality. One should set an example for other people to follow. And how, in the end, bhakti is the perfection of Karma Yoga also. He mentions that in these verses. Right? So the lessons we can understand is escapism is not spiritual, right? Renunciation or tyaga must be fueled by both detachment and attachment. So one should be detached to matter, that means detached from fruits of activities, but at the same time, one must be attached to the spiritual pursuits. One must develop taste for spirituality. One must like develop a taste towards spiritual activities. So that eventually will pull us more and more into spiritual activities. So both must be there. So that is done in the mode of goodness. Therefore, it is in an advanced stage and not to be initiated by beginners. So the complete renunciation is done in the jnana path only in the higher advanced stage. In the beginning, one has to perform one's duty with the right attitude, the art of work. So karma yoga has to be performed first properly, then this will eventually lead to jnana, where at that point one may renounce everything, even their work, and take up to exclusive jnana yoga or dhyana yoga. But that's in the jnana path, the other path, the difficult path. So it's very difficult and a risky path. So Krishna doesn't recommend that path. And then he says, instead, you start off with karma yoga and move towards bhakti, right? Because it's easier to do and much easier to attain the goal also. So therefore, he recommends bhakti as the perfection of karma yoga. You want to do your duty, do your duty, but do it for me. That is the highest goal. So these are all the lessons that we have covered all the way in chapter 3 up to verse 32. And then the last part of chapter 3 will talk about the material conditioning, right? He'll talk about desires and aversion. Basically, Arjuna will ask Krishna, what is it that's causing, okay, you've talked about not doing duty is sin, right? But what is it that causes a person to want to do sin? Like, for example, I know what you have said. You told me that I should fight, I should continue, but I still don't want to. I still feel like I want to let go everything and go. So I have an inclination towards sin. Why? Why does this happen? What causes it? So then, right, then Krishna will explain. He will explain ultimately in chapter 3. He will say, it is due to one thing only, the one enemy which everyone has, which is causing the person to always move towards sin. What is that one thing? That one thing is the greatest enemy that we have. Maha Shatru. Shatru means enemy. Maha Shatru. And that enemy is called lust or kama, which is born out of desire. So we don't want to cultivate kama or lust. Because of lust, one loses one's intelligence. They don't care. Once lust is developed in the heart, even though, like Ravana knows the right and wrong, what should be done and what should not be done. But he had lots of lust in his heart. So even though he had so much of lust, he had knowledge, but because the lust was strong, the knowledge couldn't help him. So he just let it go. He just went, and so it's very important. The purpose of knowledge is to make sure that one doesn't cultivate the lust very strongly. How to stop this? So Krishna gives a very interesting discussion on that. So basically, he talks about how this lust is sitting in our body in various places. So if we consider our body is like this chariot. So this chariot, in a chariot, you can see here, there is a person sitting on the chariot. The person who is controlling, he's telling where to go. He's the owner of the chariot. He's sitting there, right? The boss. And then there is the driver. And the driver is holding the reins, and the reins are controlling the horses. So it is described that the chariot is like the body. Our body is like the chariot. And the Atma, we are the Atma, we are the soul, right? The soul is inside this body, right? So that is like the boss. And then the horses are like the five senses. We have five senses: the sense of eyes, seeing, hearing, smelling, and touching and tasting, right? So these are the 5 senses, and each of these 5 horses represent these 5 senses. Now, if the horses are not tied to a rein, they will want to run away. They are like wild horses. They will want to run away in whichever direction. 5 different directions they might run away. So people who have very weak mind, and what controls these horses? What controls these horses is the reins, right? The rein, because of the rein, which is tying the horse's mouth and everything and keeping it all within, focused in one direction, keeping them all in the same way. So this is called the mind, manas. The mind is like the rein. So people who have very weak mind, their senses easily control them. They cannot, like a baby. A baby has a weak mind. So whatever the baby wants, the mind will, mind gets overpowered very easily. So the reins are very weak, right? So the horses go in all directions. So these senses are all grouped about and controlled by the mind. And what is inside the mind? The function of the mind has a lot of desire. Mind is like the bank of desires. Inside the mind, all the desires we may have will be inside that mind. That's the purpose of the mind. The purpose of the mind is simply to desire. And not only to desire, to store impressions, vasanas, they call it. Impressions means, sometimes we go through our different experiences in life. We record certain memories. Or in better word, we record certain impressions. So these impressions of vasanas, they stay in our heart, in our mind. Mind and heart is the same, right? So it stays in manas, right? It stays in our mind. And in this way, if we think about it, if we start thinking about these impressions, then it will lead to desire. So we have to be careful. So, and when this leads to desire, and if we keep thinking about the desire, it will become lust. So that's the way how it progresses towards lust. So by all means, we have to stop it before it becomes lust. So if we think we are thinking too much about something, too much desire, then it's time to think about something else. So no, don't think about it already. So mind is like the rein, and this mind has to be controlled. The senses, which is controlled by the mind has to be controlled. If this rein is left free, if nobody is holding the rein, what happens? The horses will go in all directions. This chariot will not go anywhere. So there has to be a driver, and this driver has to hold the reins very strongly. So the driver example is called buddhi, intelligence. So the intelligence is higher than the mind. With proper intelligence, one can control the mind. And in this way, one can control the senses. But who is finally directing the intelligence? The boss, right? And this boss, he is the soul, Atma, but he is not pure. Atma is pure, but he is covered by ahamkara. So ahamkara is ego. So according to his ego, he is going to direct the buddhi, intelligence, the driver. And in this way, the mind will be controlled in whichever way that the ego is demanding. And then the senses will move in that direction. So if the ego says, if the soul, if the Atma, being covered by his ego, the ego, therefore he says, go in this direction, then the mind, the intelligence, all will move towards that direction. So it is said that this lust, this enemy called lust, is sitting, it has conquered a few of these places. What it has conquered? This lust has conquered, it has conquered the 5 forces, the senses. Lust is sitting in our eyes, lust is sitting in our nose, in our ears, in our skin, and in our tongue. Lusting over something is there. And it is also sitting in our mind. There is also lust in our mind. And lust is also taken control of our intelligence. So these are the three places where the lust is sitting. And as long as the lust is strong, then it's very difficult. It will lead one towards sin. So that is the danger. So, and as long as the person is conditioned, he doesn't have spiritual knowledge, then he is controlled by the three modes of nature: the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, the mode of ignorance. It is always turning and turning and turning. Sometimes he is in the mode of ignorance, sometimes he's in the mode of passion, sometimes he's in the mode of goodness, sometimes he feels good, he feels kind, sometimes he feels jealous, he feels hatred, sometimes he feels like destroying everything. So, you can see a baby, right? How the baby behaves. Always in these three different modes. It switches from one to one to one very quickly. So this is how one is controlled. So what's the solution? The solution is higher than the buddhi, higher than the mind is the soul. So one has to purify oneself from the soul. In this way, clear everything, control. If one gives food to the soul, then the soul becomes strong, and the soul is able to control the buddhi, the intelligence, and the intelligence becomes purified by the process of spirituality, and pure intelligence will direct the mind in the right way. It will tell the mind, this desire is not good, that desire is not good, and it will give the strength to the mind to cut off these desires. And in this way, the senses are automatically controlled. So this is spiritual process, right? So that's why we give food to the soul. Spirituality is basically giving food to the soul. So therefore, when ignorance is destroyed, when knowledge is there, then one will act in such a way so that we can give food to the soul. And in this way, control the intelligence, control the mind. And in this way, desires are controlled. And when desires are because we cannot stop the desire, but we can control it, our impressions become purified. More and more spiritual impressions will come into our mind. And in this way, our desires will change from material desires, they will become spiritual desires. Desire to serve Krishna, desire to serve his devotees, desire to, this kind of things, spiritual desires. And that will lead to spiritual activity, and that will bring us out of this material creation. Okay, so that is basically the understanding. I don't have time to go to the 4 pillars of Dharma. We'll talk about it some other time. Let's just go straight to food for the soul. So what is this food for the soul? Our spiritual sadhana, our activity daily which we do, our chanting, our reading of the Bhagavad Gita, our faith in the scriptures, our worship, offering of puja. So Shravanam, it begins with hearing, because we won't do any of these things if we don't hear. When we hear, the faith is developed, it becomes stronger and stronger. And when we hear more and more, our faith becomes strong, then we will start chanting. So Shravanam, Kirtanam. So Kirtanam, we will get more faith in this chanting. So as we chant more and more, our desire to hear more and more also increases. So chanting, hearing is like a loop. One will feed the other. And together with that, we purify ourselves. Our soul becomes nourished and becomes stronger. Spiritual strength is developed. We will have the ability to direct our intelligence. Our intelligence will become purified by this process of chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And our mind will become stronger, and we can conquer over our baser desires. So what is this chanting? We can chant Bhagavad Gita slokas. We can also chant the names of God. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, daily like this. We can allocate some time, maybe 30 minutes or so. 30 minutes, we can do 4 rounds. So one round will take about 8 minutes, 7 to 8 minutes. So 15 minutes for 2 rounds, 30 minutes for 4 rounds. 1 hour for 8 rounds, 2 hours for 16 rounds. So like that we can go on. So let us all chant together. Jaya Sri. We invoke the mercy of the Lord first by this pranam mantra to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who introduced and re-established this chanting of this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, who is none other than the Supreme Lord Krishna. So Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we can chant in any way, we can sing it, we can also chant with japa, so long as we finish a certain amount of rounds daily. That is the idea. So thank you very much. We can end here. Any questions from anyone before we end? So if you have anything you would like to ask, clarify, or whatever you want to share, you can just unmute yourself and speak, or you can type it in the chat. Or if it comes to you later, you can also put it in the WhatsApp. So not a problem. Mm-hmm. Oh.
Right, when we do the duty in like more a passion way, but we do the duty, but we do it because we want something. Do we get less sin, or do we get the same amount of sin?
You don't get sin for doing your duty. You only get sin for not doing your duty. But so long as you do your duty according to dharma, you don't get sin. So if you are doing adharma, like for example, I'm a butcher, I'm killing animals, so that is adharma. So therefore there is sin. But if like you have a duty of, you're a child, so your duty is to study. So if you do your duty properly, you don't get sin. You get more piety, you get more punya if you do it properly. If you don't do it properly, your punya is very small. And in fact, if you neglect your duty, you don't do it properly, that's also neglect, right? If you don't do your duty and you neglect it, then you get sin. Anyway, so that was my daughter, Janavi, 10 years old. So she was listening. Okay, anyway, any other questions? If nothing else? Okay. So if nothing else, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. It really enthuses me that you attend these meetings. Thank you so much. And I hope that I'm able to pass something from the Bhagavad Gita. If at all any questions, please don't hesitate to ask in the WhatsApp. So we will see you all again. Okay. So happy reading Bhagavad Gita. Happy chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Do visit the temple if you are free on Sundays or wherever, or festivals, and associate with the devotees. Many things we can learn. So with that, thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki, Bhagavad Gita ki, Sri Krishna Bhagavan ki. Jai. Hare Bol.